Hi, my name is Carlos. I am the Global Happiness Navigator and CEO of Delivering Heaven Spain. And I've been here, I think, since August 2010 that I met Tony, and October 2011 that I went to the States with Jen and James and started thinking about what this could be. And today I'm based in Spain. I'm leading the delivery pod team and looking forward to share a lot of the answers hopefully we have for you.
Yeah, Carlos, do you want to give a line of what the delivery pod is for people that don't know?
Sure. Basically, the delivery pod is where everything related with, sorry for the same word, delivery, actually has to happen. So anything related with content creation, anything related with all the coach sulting practices that we go into clients, all the processes and the bench that actually deliver that, all the workshops and basically the masterclass that we are delivering and then giving to our clients and to people. So anything has online tools and other services. So everything that has to do with the delivery practice actually falls on the delivery pod, and that's why we have a great team, because it sounds like a lot, it is a lot, so we have a great team.
Yeah. Sounds like a lot because it is a lot.
Yeah. And then, Jen, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Bree. So I'm Jenn Lim. I almost 10 years ago, 2010, helped launch Delivering Happiness, the book, with Tony, the CEO of Zappos. And prior to that, I was a consultant at Zappos for 7-8 years or so. And since then, evolved it into a company as we are today. And it's pretty trippy to think that it's almost been 10 years just because we didn't think we were going to do much more than a book. And I think it goes to show just like the people that are signing in from all over the world. That's the reason why we decided to evolve it to a company. The book is translated in 20 languages, and we felt, hey, you know, we might be able to do this more than just what Zappos did. We might be able to do this around the world. So yeah, it's been quite a journey and an adventure, and amazing that you guys are all here, because this is actually our why of helping share our lessons learned, and hopefully you can glean some things to take away with from your culture questions and issues and challenges and that you're facing.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we're excited to have everybody here answer your culture question. Everyone who registered for this webinar submitted a question. As we go through the content, you'll see some questions are consolidated, some are grouped together, because, you know, even though we're all from different organizations, it's funny that we have similar challenges too when it comes to creating a better culture for our companies. So let's just go over what we'll gain from today, where we'll talk about the answers to your questions, explore tips and insights on how to tackle those common workplace challenges, dive deeper into examples from real life companies too. I know Carlos and Jen will sprinkle some examples in from our own work. And your best tools for today would be the chat button that we all kind of experimented with, and saying hi and introducing ourselves. And we'll also follow up with the executive ebook. So I don't know if everyone's gotten a chance to download it, but we'll be following up with an email with a link to it. It's a free downloadable ebook where, you know, we talk about what executives need to know to move your organization from, you know, just surviving mode to actually thriving into this new age of technology and change. So let's just go ahead and dive into this. While we go through these questions, I also love to point out a simple formula that we use at DH. It's happier employees equal happier customers, and that equals more profitable business and meaningful lives. So as we answer these questions, just keep that in mind. You know, it kind of all boils down to this very basic but essential relationship to create these profitable businesses, especially in the new age of all these challenges and changes and, you know, different workplace trends coming through, that a lot of the answers will really boil down to how to make this happen. All right, so let's go into the first question here. So the question is, how do we communicate to executives on what the company culture is really like and get them to prioritize it? Okay, so I think, Carlos, you can go ahead and take that one.
Okay, basically I think, and obviously I like Jen to chime in, but the most a broad answer to this probably would be that we need to understand what these people really want and the people that we're talking really want. So these executives, at the end of the day, we need to speak their language. Something we've learned is that when we talk about culture, when we talk about happiness, when we try to do these projects, many interlocutors, many people get interested. And when you talk to a chief financial officer, or when you talk to a chief marketing officer, or HR, or the CEO, the way to speak to them and the way to explain to them what culture really is like, and what how can they prioritize them and why is it beneficial for them, needs to adapt to whatever they're interested in. So if you're talking to HR, most likely you're basically trying to share with them the benefits and talent attrition and all the onboarding and selection processes and all the internal processes with people and into their performance management, whatever that is, right? So turnover of employees, all those kind of things is what you adapt to. If you talk to the financial officer, you kind of guys imagine what kind of things you mentioned to share how the culture actually has an impact on those elements. So for me, the biggest thing to understand here, or how I would approach this on how to communicate to executives, is executives or not executives is adapting the speech and adapting the way to communicate of whatever the other person is interested in, and not what we want to share. How amazing, obviously, building a great culture is for businesses only.
Yeah, it's just and Bree, if you wanted to go on, but I just wanted to build on that, Carlos. So I think all the things you said, I totally agree with as well. I think that one way I think about it, to try and simplify all this, is like, I think when you talk about culture, or actually in businesses in general, or brand or whatever, I always think about it in two groups: stats and stories. So on one end, especially for an executive, not much time, just give me the facts, or just tell me what's important. By thinking about the stats and stories, like, no matter who that person is, to your point, Carlos, it's like, if they're more analytical, they'll want to hear the stats. If they're less analytical, more emotional driven, or just want to hear something that can move themselves or some other people, that's where the stories come in. So I think to build that sort of case of, in this example at least, is about culture, to really get to that person's head, is combining those two elements. Of the stats example would be, our retention is going from, like, our turnover rate went from 25 to 45% in the last quarter. This is a problem. Here's a story. One of our rock star performers in sales left because we have a bad culture, or because he was not rewarded and recognized, or so and so down the line. So by combining those two things together, I think any executive, at least a good, decent executive, would lend an ear to say, okay, that makes sense. How can we solve it? And then for us, our belief is when it comes through culture.
Yeah, and we actually threw in a poll during this question and answer. Looks like about, I'll go ahead and look at the results here. It's kind of split. 44% say of our attendees say, our executives at the company are on board with prioritizing culture, and 44% maybe it depends. Some people say it's not even on the radar. So, it really depends. And trying to figure out how they would best get on board is a good way to start, because yeah, you're right. Some people are more analytical and some people are more about the story side too. I do want to go into the next question here. Give me a second. And so the question is, what should our approach be when there are command and control decision-making practices in place? So let's start off by addressing what command and control is. And Carlos, do you want to go ahead and take that one?
Yeah, sure. I think that's the main element that we need to define what command and control means, honestly. And that's why some of these questions are we're trying to answer some specific situations and with some stories. But in some organizations, command and control could be very micromanagement, very hierarchical. If you have read the book of Reinventing Organizations, we could be talking about a red organization. It could be talked about like that. So in that situations, it would be probably one way to approach that. There's other kinds of organizations that command and control are a lot lighter. what I would like to share here is, I think, two elements, which is more of the reality of today of some organizations and the future of work. The reality of today is that in some organizations, we need to leverage what kind of command and control culture really means and what if it works. Because as Daniel Pink, I don't know if you saw their TED Talk, but as Daniel Pink mentions, in those companies that are more industrial oriented, more mechanical oriented, the ones that the tasks are normally mechanical and simple to resolve, that command and control, carrot and the stick kind of culture actually does work. It does has a result and a return, and it works. It functions well. The thing is that going into the future of work, and we see that more and more organizations, what do they do have is more complex situations to solve, things that are not mechanical, things that are more organical, things that have multiple and several solutions and ways to actually get there. And in those environments, which is more and more the majority, and it will become more and more because all the mechanical work will be substituted by machines. In that kind of future of work, where the complexity is, we need to tackle all the collective intelligence. We need to tackle and to be able to involve and include people in the solution making, because the command and control has one flaw, one main flaw, which is it depends always on the hierarchical piece and on one person that scales out to the next, and so to the next level and to the next level. So in that future of work, that kind of command and control, obviously we know that it's definitely against what we see the trend of organizations going more to self-managed cultures beyond more than hierarchical command and control cultures.
Yeah, cool. So, just to dovetail off that, there's another interesting. When you brought up Daniel Pink, it made me think of also this book called Reinventing Organizations by Frederic Laloux. And I think it speaks very nicely to this whole element of what is command and control, but also, and I love that you brought this up, Citos, in terms of the future of work. Because I think that's like a recurring theme we've been hearing, not just about culture, but really what is the future of work and how can we start building more flexible, adaptable organizations and teams today to be able to actually survive, if not thrive, in the future of work. So what I liked about what Laloux did in his book, Reinventing Organizations, is that he was able to categorize different kinds of decision-making companies from the command and control all the way to those that are the most fluid, most adaptable. And one of the important points that I think he brought up was that like every single company out there that we're in doesn't fall squarely in each of these buckets. We're all actually a hybrid of these 4 different stages we can be, from all the way back to the industrial age type of command and control, all the way to like the futuristic future work type of adaptable companies. So I think one thing, if you are in one of those sort of organizations where it is command and control today, I think the biggest thing is to embrace it, kind of accept it. That's just kind of the way it is right now. But the reality is that because things are changing so quickly around us, if we're stuck in that, then we know that we will not be able to be sustainable or be successful, or even get projects out the door in a way that is meeting market demand. All these things that we within teams or executives will quickly find out if we're staying within that old school, essentially stoic place. So I would suggest, if you're in that kind of environment, to test new things that are not command and control and actually more adaptable and flexible for your team, and show the results to your senior management or your leadership, and they will actually say, oh, that's working. And if you don't even talk about those terms of command and control, you just show the results of like, well, this is the ROI that we got out of being more adaptable and flexible. And then you can actually push and progress your team and therefore your company in really positive ways, and get ready for like what we were saying about the future of work, and getting ready for it now.
Yeah, I definitely, well, actually, speaking about measuring culture and, how to really understand like where your culture is in terms of is it healthy, or, what we should be measuring for. The next question kind of goes into that too. So, a big question is, what does a healthy, happy culture look like, and what KPI should we be measuring for? A lot of people are in cultures where it's like, it's okay. Like they go to work, that's fine. But what does it really mean to have a happy or a healthy company culture?
He does. Look at that smile. I feel like you want to take this.
Carlos loves these kind of questions.
Obviously, those very two big, huge questions. Going to try to answer them, very simply. In terms of like, does a healthy, happy culture look like? If probably in the ebook, or if you can find on the website, there's the pyramid, which is basically our model. And over there, you will see that there's some elements to work on, like how to work on values and culture and behaviors, how to work on higher purpose and the different elements of happiness, of control, progress, and connectedness. Not really want to get into that because obviously that would be really long to explain. But working on those elements in three different layers, which I think are important. That's how I think it's not only happy but healthy, right? Because it's sustainable. And those three layers are communication, like how do we embed those elements in the way we communicate our values? When we communicate, how do we communicate with values? When we our processes, how are they done? So in the way we communicate, the way obviously as I was saying now, the process, the operating model, how is all these elements, progress, control, purpose, and so on, embedded into the different processes that go from HR processes, onboarding, hiring, so on, to big decision-making processes. Like, if you're in a company that is big and has a M&A kind of strategy where they want to acquire new companies, what kind of companies are we acquiring? Are we acquiring companies that are aligned with our purpose and also our values? So, processes, communication, and also leadership, right? Is the leadership really aligned with all these elements that are working on this? So how does it look like a company that works these elements in those three different layers? What KPIs? At the end of the day, and that's a big depend in a way that whatever you want to measure, whatever is working for you, whatever you really want to achieve. We have some clients that want, one of the KPIs is actually market share, because that's the goal they have, right? They want to grow in market share, and the way to do it is to create a culture of happiness and create this kind of elements. There's some other companies that they actually have a pain, and they say, well, I have issues on talent retention and employee turnover, or company productivity, et cetera, et cetera. So those also indicators are being measured, the levels of creativity and innovation, and that today is so key to be able to adapt to whatever the market is throwing at us. So in terms of the indicators, there's many. Some are more soft, they're equally important, but sometimes they don't matter that much in some layers of the executives. And some are more hard, which can be definitely aligned with business, if we're mentioning that, even with sales. We've seen studies that we can actually increase, in one of our clients, we increased 39% in sales based on the project and on the elements that they created to that culture. So KPIs, there's many. And actually we have tools for that, and we are tool agnostic as a company, but there's definitely tools like the Delivery Happiness Index that has more than 40 KPIs. There is 2 Days Mood that has other kinds of KPIs like mood maps. So at the end of the day, KPIs are a lot there. The question is, what do you want to measure? What do you want to focus on? And I think that's the most important KPIs to focus
on. Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Carlos. So if anyone has any questions about what KPIs, how they're aligning with their business goals, things like that, and how they're aligning with their culture, like, also feel free to contact us, and we'll be able to give you some insight on if it's even working or out for you. So I want to go into this next question. This is a really cool question because it goes into this ongoing workplace trend, global workplace trend, really. So the face-to-face work in the open and integrated spaces of the office are replaced by employees in their homes and working remotely. So people are face-to-face working in offices, and now people are going remote, or and also being distributed. So do you think that undermines the corporate culture and development of each employee? And how does that change?
So yeah, you want me to take this, Brie?
Yeah.
I actually think this is like such a present and relevant, like current and now kind of question, is because I think the stats out there in terms of the percentage of workforce in the US, at least, that's going to be remote / freelance in the next few years will be about 50%. And so that is just a new state of people, and it's not like, it's like being able to meet, like like wherever the work is, it's not actually getting people to move there. It's actually getting the work to move to where the people are or where the talent is. So it's just a whole paradigm shift in how we look at things. But what I think is interesting about this and how it pertains to culture is that we have an internal joke that is culture is what happens when your boss isn't looking. And so especially when it comes like a remote kind of environment, there's a lot of stigma attached to like, oh yeah, there's no way you can maintain culture in a remote distributed environment. But then there's two examples I think of in the near recent where, yeah, like it was Yahoo that a few years ago, the CEO, Marissa, mandated that everyone needs to come to work and not be remote. And this is a pretty big company. So that was a huge shift. It was basically a test, and unfortunately it backfired for them. We all know what kind of happened to Yahoo. That was just one of the many things I think in the management of the company, but it got people riled up. People felt like they were treated unfairly because the CEO was able to bring a nursery next to her office, and not everyone had the luxury to do that. And so all these things kind of came up within the company culture that also, like, I think caused a lot of the rifts and therefore, you know, the kind of the downfall of Yahoo. But on the other end, you have a company like Automatic, which is started by the founder of WordPress, which if you're familiar with that, they're probably running the websites that you're using today. And so they're fully remote. And here's a company that's about 1,000 people, truly global, all distributed, and they have an amazing company culture. And so I think those are pretty two extreme examples of why and how like culture can meet the needs of those companies that are out there that want to be remote and distributed because they are meeting the demand of where we are as a global workforce, and in a way that everyone can be, you know, happy, productive, engaged, because they're, you know, basically living their own roles within the workplace and within their lives. So I think it brings new challenges to have culture in a remote environment, but it's super doable. And like if you know, we drink our own champagne at DH, so we're all global as well. And so being able to especially drink our own champagne of being a culture company, we want to make sure that our people are also feeling the same way. So if anyone has any questions about how to do that in culture, we'd love to field them, because it's kind of like a personal passion of mine to be able to do this in this really changing world that we have now.
Yeah, and we actually took a little poll during this question, so let's go ahead and look at the results here. All right. Oops. I don't know if you guys can see the shared results, but the question was, if you're a remote worker or have remote workers on your team, do you struggle with being included or including your remote team members in the culture? And we have about, 40% saying that, it's working for them regardless of location. 20% say that, they are the remote workers and they feel a little isolated. 30% say they don't really have remote workers. And 10% say, sometimes we forget about them, which I think can definitely happen when you have a mixed workforce too. So just because, some workers are remote or people are in different locations doesn't mean the culture has to like fall to the wayside either, especially when you build a really great foundation for it.
Just to maybe to add a quick comment there, because I think it's really cool to see how organizations shift. Companies like HP, they have programs like come back to the office kind of program, but at the same time, it's basically creating the space for being able to do probably both. Like it definitely a remote culture works, and we have a lot of examples as like Jenn shared. At the same and organizations we see that, for example, this client that we're working now, like they have literally office space. They did a study, and they have office space for only 70% of people of the organization, because they already assume that around 25 to 30% will do remote work, right? It's free seating, and people can access to the job, can go there to the place, to the different locations. They have over 50 locations to actually connect, to spend the time with their team members, to maybe have in-person meetings. But they have already that culture of self-management where like you decide where to come or not. And still in many cases, still people sometimes prefer to go to the office. In this case, 70% of it, right? So so that's just examples on how to combine both realities.
Right, yeah. Let's go into this other question, which I think everyone has kind of experience in when it comes to, in toxic behaviors or toxic culture. So this question is, even with turnover in staff and leadership, it seems that previous toxic culture prevails. How do we work to impact this? So there's a lot of factors going into this question that we don't know, but let's try our best to answer it. Jen, you want to take the lead on this one?
Yeah, it's I guess this sense that culture is made of people. This is true. So there's also there's kind of a going assumption like, oh, when toxic people leave, it must mean that our culture will get better. And in some cases, yes. In some cases, no. But I think that because there's that variability, unless we as leads of our teams or leads of our organization, unless we build the foundational systems in place, then people will come and go, and that will sway what the culture is. But again, like pinning it down to a cornerstone of what culture is and what it means to that organization or team is so important to stop that sort of fluctuation. And so how I like to think about it is like you can believe in any framework you want. I mean, there's tons out there. And so for us, like we've been testing a lot of these things, from the Zappos days to scientific happiness and positive psychology. So what we've been trying to build is like, what is that universal framework that we can use to make sure we have that underpinning of what culture really can be from a foundational sense. And so for us, higher purpose, if you imagine a pyramid, this is kind of like one of our frameworks. Higher purpose is on top, and then you have our core values and behaviors on the bottom. And in that middle section is what we call the levers of scientific happiness, which includes things like sense of connectedness and sense of progress and a sense of control, like essentially a sense of autonomy that I can make my own decisions and I can act upon that. So if you imagine that pyramid, like that's what we believe to have worked with all these different organizations to be able to create that foundation so that no matter who's coming in, you have that sort of filter as to whether or not this person is a culture fit, whether or not this person can thrive. And so at that same time, it's not just like some theoretical kind of stuff as to what culture can be, but it becomes an operationalized like system for your company that's based on something that's true and authentic, because ideally your higher purpose is based on the DNA of your company. And therefore, is this person that's coming in or leaving, are they a fit for that DNA and therefore your purpose and values? So looking at Ray's question, yes, we do have a visual for that framework. And I think it might be, is it in the download, Bree?
I think actually, that's a great idea. We'll follow up with that visual. So it's of our model into the follow-up email with everybody. So thanks, Ray.
Fiona's on top of that. Thanks, Fee. But yeah, thanks for that question.
Okay, awesome. So let's go into this next one. It's about scaling culture, which I think, you're always wanting your business to grow, wanting new locations or franchises or offices and more people. So like, how can we actually scale culture in the same way we scale other operations of the company, in the hopes, of course, making it successful too? So, Carlos.
So, I mean, here I would say there's obviously two answers. One is scaling culture within the organization, and as we said before, like those three elements of how to do it through communication, through launch, through elements like building an ambassador team, culture team that can actually scale this down through the people with the different initiatives, and always remaining these initiatives alive and making sure that things happen, leadership and processes, right? So that's the way to do it. What more specific to the questions in terms of opening new locations and franchises, I think it's important to understand that if any newcomers that we have, like when we talk about process, there's like an onboarding process and a selection process that we go through the due diligence of knowing that if that new franchise, for example, has the right values, it's aligned with our purpose, right? So there's a due diligence on that end. But after that, obviously there's all the onboarding side. And the thing is that franchise and new locations, new offices are sometimes two different animals. When you do more the green feeding kind of strategy, where you're basically yourself investing and opening your own offices, like putting the cash on the table and then actually saying, we're going to open an office in Madrid or in London or wherever that is, or in Indianapolis, right? That would be more on the traditional side, like the same way that you would, hire 20 new people for a project in the organization. You'll go through the hiring process, align, and check the values, aligning values, doing the onboarding, and putting these people into the systems. Right? That would be more the green feeding side. Franchise is a bit more complex. Why? Because normally the nature of the franchise is that the director of that franchise is also the owner of the business, right? Like McDonald's style, that they has many franchises. The owner of the McDonald's in Fifth Avenue, that probably has other locations, is the owner and not McDonald's per se, right? So that also has a little challenge. And we have clients like this, like for example, GLS, that they are like UPS in Europe, 14,000 employees, and all the little agencies and franchises that actually have their trucks and their cars to deliver all the little packages. Those are franchises that they belong to the local owner. With that complexity, yes, you can still share all the brand, all the knowledge, all the know-how, all the values, and put them into the processes of onboarding. But there's that emotional subtlety that we need to go more also in the inspirational side, in the convincing side, right? Because they need to want to be on board even more than the rest. So the way to scale it down is the same way as any other organization. The way to actually process it and actually achieve that, depending on what the nature of those different locations are, it will have more of the inspirational side or only the process side.
Yeah, and we actually just ran another polling question during this one too, asking do you have a culture team in place at your organization? Because that's a part of our approach when we help organizations is giving the accountability of the culture to some type of culture team, HR team, people team. So let's take a look at the results. Yeah, so looks like about 50% of people don't have a team in place. 25% say yes, they are, and they're so glad because that team rocks. 38% say yes, we have one, but can't tell really, how they help or where it really helps the business. And then 13% are saying, no, we don't have one actually, but we're doing great on our own. So it's not really a standard practice yet to have a team being accountable for culture, but I guess, through our work, we've seen it to be a key to a lot of success, especially when you're scaling and growing and trying to implement culture through like huge organizations, like 60,000 employee ones too.
Yeah, I think to that point. Oh, go ahead, Titos.
No, I was just going to ask you let us know, Bree, if we have some time to also share some specific stories about how to do these kind of things. So at the same time, we don't want to take much time.
Yeah. No, yeah, I definitely will. I think we might have a little bit of time. So Jen, sorry, did you have something to add?
Oh, no, it's just a quick add to what you're saying on the whether or not it could be useful with culture teams. I think it's what we've seen is that it can be a very organic / authentic way to build culture and sustain culture top down and bottom up, so that it's not just like one person's vision or just HR's or culture lead's vision. Is actually you're constantly getting this flow of new ideas and execution across all the different offices or locations. So that's kind of cool, and all levels. So I think that's pretty cool what the teams can do.
Yeah, and that's the kind of the key to bridging the top down and the bottom up, I guess, too, on creating that culture of accountability. Kind of back to that first or the earlier question about command and control, like, command and control might not work because it's very top down, whereas, a bottom up integrated approach with top down really comes from creating these culture teams or a team or some type of group that helps maintain the culture as you grow. Let's dive into this next question here. So the question is it okay for a company to have a subculture that may be different from another's in the same corporate division, even if it's department to department? So Jen, I know you talk a little bit about subcultures pretty often, so you can go ahead and take this one.
Yeah, it's actually kind of building off of the graphic that Ray asked for, like that pyramid I was trying to describe earlier, because that, again, is like that cornerstone foundation of what we believe sustainable culture can be. So our approach and our belief is that once you have that in place, subcultures are actually not just expected, is actually encouraged. And we see this already happening, even if you don't define your culture, but there's already inherent subcultures between the team within engineering versus the team within legal. And then if you extrapolate that out to the global sense, and it's like there's going to be a subculture for a company that's in India versus a company that's in here in the States or where we are. But so I guess in the end, like it's just if we think about it from a nature perspective, we have animals that exist around the world, but they all have their own, ways of existing within their own specific ecosystem. And I think it's important for us to, as culture leaders, to embrace that kind of subcultures, because otherwise there will be tensions that will kind of erode that foundational pyramid that I was talking about. So this also, I think Bree, you were alluding to, is kind of tapping back into what we were talking about earlier about reinventing organizations and the different kind of organizations that are out there, from command and control to the most agile, adaptable ones out there. I think this subculture concept is what it actually operationalizes how to make adaptable teams, because it's essentially how do you decentralize a company is by allowing for these subcultures to not just survive but thrive in a way that they are essentially, you're giving them the ability and empowerment to say, we trust you that you will make the best decisions because you know more than we do, because you're in a different region or a different department. Then therefore they will step up to that sort of accountability and freedom to say, okay, we do know how to solve this problem. So what you see is that you're not just empowering them for the sake of being a more decentralized company, but you're actually seeing the results of a more agile decision-making process. Things get produced faster. The teams itself are more engaged. And so it's kind of works on all ends of why the whole idea of having these more decentralized, self-managed organizations speak to why subcultures can really work for organizations. So I think it's, again, not just expected, but I think we should all encourage them.
Right, and I think subcultures also allow more experimentation. We have some clients who we first really only start working maybe with a specific department or team, but that change and the changes they're making are becoming more pervasive throughout the organization. People are getting excited about culture in other parts. Maybe they're not even from that department, but that's also allows for change to happen when you give that sense of control to these different subcultures to kind of be who they are, be the engineering team, be the team from Honolulu, or the team from some other place around the world. So it can be really empowering as long as you have that foundational element when it comes to your culture.
Yeah, and just to build off that, Bree, it's pretty cool just to see in this last year how we are now launching DH in Japan. So basically local partners in Japan and Egypt and Mexico, all with the DH brand, but local partners that are actually selling and delivering our, or expand our sense of purpose and impact in the world. And seeing how they're taking this foundational stuff that we've been building and testing over the last almost 10 years, and then really just incorporating it and integrating it within their own culture. Because the way that DH Japan is going to be delivering is so different from how we're doing it here or Mexico or Egypt. I think it speaks to the audience of this this webinar. It's pretty amazing how neighbors of the world can get together, and if we're bounded by one thing, in this case, culture, scientific happiness, then we can actually impact the world in our own ways.
Yeah, awesome. Carlos, anything to add here? Any final thoughts on that one?
Nothing that I would not repeat. Yeah. Amen. Amen.
Amen. Right. All right, cool. So let's go into just to wrap things up here. So if there are any additional questions, we asked for some of the chat. Maybe you need to brew on what's been talked about in this webinar, and then you have some questions for us after. So feel free to email April from our team. So it's just April@deliveringhappiness.com. She can follow up with the answers and a bunch of resources that we have available for you to kind of build a little bit more on your culture too, and kind of see, where the gaps lie in your culture and where to work on it. We'll also be following up with a recording of this webinar via email with our executive ebook. Your email will also include a little bit about what the DH model is, or the DH blueprint, that kind of foundation for culture that has really worked around the world for organizations of all sizes and all different industries, and see where your company stacks up in it too. So the next webinar, just subscribe to our blog to find out. We usually announce it through our blog emails and just through our email listing too. Do we have any?
This is for Jeff.
Oh, look.
Yes, it does actually. Running out of champagne actually does count as cardio, at least in this household. I don't know about yours, but my friends put that up there for my birthday a couple years ago, and I didn't put it down, take it down, because it's my belief.
True, it's still true. So David actually has a good question. Let's take this one. How do we help C-levels walk the talk? What kind of personal transformation does it need for a successful culture, so DH culture? So let's take that first part, because I think that's really relevant to a lot of other people too, going through it.
That's an excellent question. So you want to take it? You want me to go with first swing?
Well, I'm gonna answer with a very standard answer, which is basically, if you don't know, I'll teach you. If you can't, I'll go with you and walk along with you. But if you don't want, there's nothing I can do for you. Meaning, I think that helps me a lot helps a lot when we do these journeys with normally groupal mentoring and working along with leaders, and at the same time with the individual sometimes. But we need to first get their buy-in, because there's no way we can actually help somebody walk the talk if they actually don't want, or they don't see it. They don't see the need for it. So I think we go first with the initial questions that we had. It's like, how do we make them want to pursue this culture, and how do we inspire them with stats, with data, with stories, for them to say, okay, I want to walk the talk. And then once that is accepted and wanted, which is a big step, then it's obviously going along with them with understanding their skill set, their values, their saboteurs, their resistance, their challenges, things that they will face, no matter that they have all the will in the world. They will face this kind of thing. So we kind of walk along with them with group mentoring, group coaching, and also at the same time with the individual sessions also. That definitely it's one of the approaches.
Yeah,
there's
yeah, go ahead, Jen, because you're usually need a lot of naysayers.
Which I love, actually, because those are like the most in some ways rewarding things to see, when the naysayers like actually realize what this kind of change means, because sometimes those naysayers feel like the change needs to happen out there. And then the realization needs to happen inside. It makes me think of a quote I say all the time, but I just believe it so. But it's a quote by Rumi, a Persian poet, and he said, "When I was clever, I wanted to change the world, but when I got wise, I knew I had to change myself first." And it's actually something that I think applies to, like, as we're having in this conversation right now. And people might be thinking about, like, what can I do now? But the thing is that what I've seen resonate more and more, especially after all these years, is that the change starts here. And we saw that me, we community model that flashed on the screen earlier. We say start with the me. And that personal transformation that you're asking about, David, is when you actually present it to them as, it's almost selfish. It's almost like, this is about you, dude or dudette, whoever you're talking to. This is actually about, why are you here? Like, what is it, it's like, if it's, beyond the making money kind of stuff, like, what is it that you really want to be truly authentic to within yourself? And what are your own personal goals? And what is your legacy that you want to leave? So when you kind of make it selfish in a non-bad judgmental way, then they start realizing, oh, wait, that it is about me, and I do need to make changes within myself first to be actually able to see this through, because all the changes that I want to see in my team or in my company, it's so interesting how to reflect upon themselves, like, oh wait, that's actually what I need for myself. So being able to put up that mirror, there's this other saying I heard the other day, is like, be a mirror, don't be a mechanic. So being able to just put a mirror to someone else and ask the questions that one would not want to ask yourself, but once they start thinking and reflecting, then they realize, it's the change that happens within me that I need to show within myself to be able to actually make this work successfully.
Yeah, it's a change kind of within that one leader or CEO when they start really understanding how much they impact the rest of the company, whether it's like a frontline employee or, just their peers, beyond just the business, like into their personal lives, like how much impact they really have. It's kind of humbling to realize, and that's kind of when they understand, like, it is really important to align with values. It is really important to kind of walk the talk too. So we will go ahead and end our webinar here. Thanks everybody for coming. Hope we answered some culture questions. If you do have more questions, of course, email april@deliveringhappiness.com. We'll follow up with a recording of this email. Thank you, Carlos and Jen, for joining me today and answering these live. And I hope everyone has a great week.